as the recording begins, the Reverend Tracy holds a drink in her hand she has never tasted before, and we just have to share with the audience what the first reaction is.
Yes, so I guess we decided to start with this instead of the format we literally just agreed on because this is the staunch professionalism that is
It was too funny. It was too funny how you had it, and I thought, I gotta do it.
No, it's okay. That's why it's cool. This is where we get along, right? Because this is why they say it's like listening to two friends chat in a room, because that's really the kind of entertainment you get with friends talking nerdy. So yeah, let me introduce this, and then I will try it live, because that's really, I was just about to say, should I try this live action? And I guess I will, because I haven't drank from it yet. So what I have, little side note, I don't believe I've actually nerded out about this on the show yet, but I may have mentioned that the Mr. Reverend and myself do try to kind of do some Ayurvedic practices in our life. We're not, fully staunch over, and a lot of it's kind of gone shaky just because of moving and how that can just disrupt any routine. Right. But so one thing that we did want to try to do eventually is get rid of coffee from our diet. For any of those out there that will just nerd out about me mentioning some words that make sense to people who follow this, it sparks up your pitta, and it creates like an imbalance there, and it can lead to a lot of jitteriness and shit. Like really, literally the side effects that caffeine's known for. Yeah. But anywho, so something that they recommend is dandelion root or chicory root. And so we found this drink blend. And I should also mention my mother-in-law, so the Mr. Reverend's mom, is also trying stuff like this. It was remedies for blood pressure and stuff, right? So we're trying it with her. And we got our bag today, and it is Dandy Blend. It's an instant herbal beverage with dandelion. And I tried a sip of it earlier, but it was just plain, but this time I decided to do a whole thing of it and doctor it up kind of like I would my coffee. So it's got a little bit of spice and some almond milk. So here we go. This is probably, I don't know if this is even exciting.
We are marking this in human history. Everybody will know the day you had that first drink. So for the audience at home, we are anticipating. Let's do it.
All right, let's do this.
All right, no cringing. That's good.
No cringing. Yeah, no, that's actually, it's really good. It's really not, because, coffee is bitter, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what, I like darker roasts, right? And so the bitterness is something that I actually go for. I do either espresso roast or a dark French, right? So, and it did have, suggestions on the back, by the way. I thought that was cool. Because it's if you want more of a tea-like beverage, you use a level teaspoon. If you want a rich, full-bodied coffee, etc., it's got suggestions. So we did our best to kind of get to our espresso level. Right. And is it bang on for coffee? No. But I think I would honestly enjoy drinking this in the mornings. We've tried some other stuff before that just wasn't good. It was it's supposed to replace coffee, you steep it. And it was mostly the chicory root, but this has a bunch of stuff in it. But yeah, that's pretty tasty actually.
Now, how does it? You're not going to know until later, I guess. But what are the supposed benefits in terms of pepping you up if this is going to be a coffee replacement?
Right. Now there are some stuff, and that is total herbalist type stuff, and people who are into it far deeper than me. It's actually something I want to study, because it's a big part of Ayurveda is kind of understanding what these herbs, even as much as putting pepper on your food, how much that can affect certain balances within you. And it's oh, you know what? When I put it that way, that kind of makes sense, because if you realize you might take a pepper extract as a remedy for something, well, that goes to make one think that can affect your body. So if you're putting pepper on everything, is that maybe doing something, etc.? So I can see the interest in learning this. But I couldn't name off the top of my head, but I do believe that chicory root and dandelion root both have something about them that help with mental alertness and things like that. That one of the things that they people that are really on it with drinking this stuff will tell you oh yeah, it's the benefits and the alertness of coffee, but not the crash, So supposedly, and I guess I'll figure that out, because I do oh my God, I do feel it. I don't have caffeine withdrawal, but when I don't have coffee in the morning, it's just such a regular part of my day it definitely feels different. So
I mean, it also does depend on how you take your coffee. I mean, you could be like my grandma and do like the heavy cream, heavy sugar type of deal, or you can do it straight black. And I found that straight black coffee, unless you're drinking like 12 cups within an hour, you're normally not going to get that much of a crash.
Right. It just kind of depends, because it goes to your own body being different sometimes. It's like my brother, for example, used to have caffeine withdrawal because he had Dr. Pepper every day, like multiples. But whenever you compare it to the caffeine in coffee, like he's still having that amount of coffee, but he's having withdrawal, whereas other people could do that and stop and be fine. So it kind of goes back to that every body is different, which is another point of Ayurveda. Just random little side note to my health nerding out, I guess. So, but right now we just actually bought a huge thing of coffee, because if anybody knows, and I think I've mentioned it on here, I bulk buy. So of course that means we have coffee pretty much until the end of our lease. So this is just like we're not going to make a second pot anymore remedy. So we figure it's at least better than having extra caffeine. It's still cutting back.
Starting the healthy habit here, and then by the time you make that cross-country trip, make the full change there. Makes total sense there. But speaking of talking nerdy, welcome everybody to Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim Jousma, and with me, as you have heard, we have the good Reverend Tracy. And we already know you're doing good there, of course, drinking that coffee substitute.
Having my beverage, yeah. So how are you doing?
Doing good. I did get yelled at by my sister early this
week. Womp. All right.
Yeah, she's a listener to the show, and she was listening to last week's episode where we talked about the chicks in the Iraq War, and she was most upset at my bringing up a memory I had of her making a comment about Natalie Main's weight. Now, we've talked about memory on the show before, and it's a memory that I swear happened. I would not have brought it up to create. I would not create something just to make her look bad or anything like that. And I also would not tell a story to a true story to try and make her look bad. It was just I brought that up just as the observation that because we were also talking about Larry the Cable Guy making comments about the lead singer's weight, and it was a common thing. I'm sure not only for Natalie Maines of the Dixie Chicks, but every other woman working in the entertainment industry, period. So it was not meant to single out my sister. So for that, I do apologize. As far as the memory, that's how I remember it. But to be clear, memory is not infallible. You can remember things and have that not be right.
Yeah, and if you want a taste of a better explanation than we could give, there's totally an episode of Adam Ruins Everything where he talks about justice, and he goes into that topic of just how fallible memory is and why it's not necessarily like the best thing to use like as deciding factors in cases. And this is stuff where, by the way, it's like this woman, I actually think might be an example, if it's not from the book, Unfair, that I believe I've mentioned on this show before. It was either a quote or something shared, in Adam Ruins Everything, but essentially just it can happen, and it has happened, where a woman says, yes, this is the man who raped me. And because, he was right there in her face, right? Of course she would know what he looks like. But then DNA evidence later being able to happen, and then they find out that there's no way it could have been that person. And that's a whole other interesting level of having to deal with it, because the story that I recall either reading about at one point or seeing, and maybe I could try to find this, she had met with this person that she had falsely accused. And she's like, I don't get it because my brain still says it's him, but I know it can't be. But sorry, I do love that topic. I find it extremely fascinating just how memory is. It's I brought up the times when I worked at a gas station in my 20s and got robbed, and the second time that happened, I saw the robber run outside, get in his truck. It was third shift, and I saw a white truck with what I thought was black trim.
guy was arrested, and they called me in, and I ended up seeing the truck. It was a white truck with red trim, with the shadows at night being what they were. I just made an assumption of the color without knowing it, and that helped eventually set that guy free, apparently. So, but again, it's memory is a tricky thing. So, as in regards to that story, like I mentioned, it was not meant to goof on my sister or anything like that. I mean, I got the better stories for that. No.
Yeah, and I really think like there's also a lot of if that was actually said by a person. This was decades ago. I would like to hope, especially once you move away from the people who have kind of normalized like fat shaming women, and you realize that maybe some things you used to believe or say like were bad, that maybe you're not that person anymore. Like this was a long time ago. So I would like to think that whether or not it happened, that your sister is still a good person, and like I also totally, yes, two siblings can remember something totally different. My brother and I have a story that hilariously enough, we each swear up and down that the beginning of each version of it, he swears his version is right, I swear my version is right, but both of them end the same. Okay. And we don't really care. It was about a fight that happened. I mean, we could go into it if you want to, or we can like put a pin in it teaser style and do it another time.
Well, why not? What happened in this fight?
Okay, so first of all, I need to explain how much my brother and I loved bagel dogs. Okay, and we weren't like a family that had a lot of money, so my mom would like order some stuff through Schwann's. And if anybody is unaware of what Schwann's is, it was like kind of this way you could order food. They had like a delivery truck and they had routes, and it was a way that they could service like some of this kind of more gourmet end of their line, right? So she would order stuff through there, like certain little souffles and shit like that. But she also ordered these bagel dogs, and it's like a New York style soft bagel and like sausage with cheddar cheese like throughout it. And it is fucking delicious. And my brother and I both loved them, right? So this story starts off of, and I swear this is right because I swear I always woke up before him, and that's my big point. If he listens to this and gives me shit, I still swear that I always woke up before him on Saturdays. So that's how I know, by the way, world, that I am correct. Anyway, so my memory of it is that I woke up before him on Saturday. I went in, the microwave was going because I was heating one up. He wakes up, walks into the living room, and smells it, and he goes, "Oh my gosh, bagel dogs." And I was like, "Sucks to be you, it's the last one." And just then the microwave goes off. We look at each other, and I know he's about to bolt for it. So I'm like, "Don't you do it!" And he like runs. I run after him, and I'm like ready. We're ready to have a fight over this fucking bagel dog. My brother turns and like basically clotheslines me. I like hit the ground, and I am just like, so by the way, that's the part of the story where we start aligning, is the point where I'm on the ground gasping for air, and he is eating the bagel dog standing over me.
Okay.
So, and I realize that's in reality, that's actually probably a really bad story.
Yeah.
But it cracks me up because I'm sorry. We lived through it. We can laugh about it. It's totally fine. My mom was like super pissed though. Like it wasn't like something that got completely ignored in the house. I'm also gonna put that out there. But yeah, to me, it's still just like one of the funniest stories ever because I don't think many people have the opportunity for being clotheslined to play out like in your life.
Yeah. I mean, wrestling moves can hurt.
Yeah, man, you got to know how to fall though. Just got to tell you got to know how to take a fall. But that was something I learned in like Taekwondo much later.
Oh yeah, I mean that's why I can never ever do what they do in the ring, just in terms of just teaching themselves how to fall. It's like your every instinct in your body is telling you not to fall like that, but doing the whole jumping and then doing the flat back bump on the ground that's like steel and like 2x4s, and it just ow. But anyway.
But also, just to preface, we didn't always have fights to that level. That was like one in very few situations where that happened, and there was recourse for that. But we laugh about it now. We both think it's a funny story. I don't think he'll give a shit at all that I shared it.
Well, if he does, you can always settle it in a cage. Boom.
Boom. Let's do this, man. It's my turn. I've had training since then. I have a select set of skills that I haven't practiced in 5 years.
Including color guard.
Oh, God, yeah. Speaking of the fall of coffee, that was a funny... I shared a funny personal photo. Well, I mean, personal makes it almost sound like it was like X-rated or some shit. Sorry. It's just basically it was a photo of my coffee.
It was attractive blend,
But my coffee was spilled all over the table and all over the floor. And I took a picture of it. And really, it was just half the time when I take pictures, it's to like just send it to people and make a joke. Very rarely do they all end up like on my Facebook. And even then, like some are set to like close friends. Like I use my social media wisely, and I've spent more hours than probably most people organizing like who's in what group. But that to me is just proper, right? Like you don't want to share everything with everybody that you know versus what you would share with your close friends. So this is one of those things that I actually just happened to share. I think possibly public because it was just a picture of nothing. And my coffee had been spilled because we had a curtain rod because we were moving, so there's things in the house that's not normally laying around.
Right.
And the Mr. Reverend was twirling it around his fingers, right? Which anybody who's ever done any like prop work like that, like color guard or flag corps or whatever, not to do that. You actually kind of risk breaking your fingers doing that, by the way. So I was like, oh, actually, and it was a light curtain rod, but like with the poles and stuff, you can't do that because they're heavier. Like you can hurt yourself. So I was like, oh yeah, by the way, it's all just kind of eye trick. Like it doesn't really go around your hand very rarely unless you're doing a toss. And so I'd spun it around and stuff because I was in color guard in high school. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like it was my fault that I encouraged playing with stuff inside the house so that he took it. And he was doing a good job. I will preface, he picked up quick up until my coffee went spilling. So it's been fun. Like as much as it could be kind of a bummer to move, like in a lot of respects, and like it could be messy and it can make you feel kind of anxious and fucking rattled because everything's everywhere. Like I don't know where anything is anymore because I keep taking shit out of the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And then I'm just mad at myself because why did I move that now? So there's been some funny moments too with spilling of coffee.
Yeah, speaking of moving, I mean, last week when we logged off the recording, I had to go with the professor to her storage to find her passport because she's planning in June to go on a trip with her other partner and whatnot. And we went out there and she couldn't find it. She was freaking out because with all of the COVID restrictions still in place in terms of traveling, with no passport, it was going to be virtually impossible for her to get a new one. But she would just happen to be looking like the next day here in the house, and she did end up finding it. And, she was happy with that. But it's just, it's like you never know what is going to be important and what's not until it is packed away in a box somewhere that you cannot get to.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. But I'm sorry, did I totally miss, did you end up finding it?
Oh, she did.
Oh, good. Okay. It's like, did you say that you found it or not? I just was really worried that I had managed to space out in a second there and miss a piece of information. It was kind of vital to the story you were telling me.
Yeah, but, she ended up finding it. It was actually in a purse that she was using before we moved here. And then, she just put it in a closet somewhere thinking, I'll use it later or whatever. But now she has it in a spot to where it will not be lost. So,
Good. Yeah, you'd mentioned like the passport thing when we left. I was anticipating an update to the bat story, though.
Oh, that is, yeah, we're going to get that too. I did kind of segue there, but yeah, the other day, the window in the kitchen was open again, and Sherman was at the window, and then out of nowhere, I noticed, like, first of all, like, the bottom of his chin started, like, huffing a little bit, like going up, like a bullfrog a little, and then he started huffing, and then just meowing, just loud and hissing, and I thought the bat was back, and so I had Aubrey go to the window to check it out. I'm over by the bedroom, like ready to like dive under blankets and whatnot. And Aubrey's she didn't want to see a bat either, but she goes over there and then she stops, then she smiles, then she turns to me and goes, "Tim, come here." And I go, "What? I don't want to see a bat." She goes, "Come here." And it's Aubrey. I trust her. So I walked over there slowly. I avoided eye contact with the window. And she says, "Look." I looked out there. It was another cat.
You're that worried about it being the bat.
Yeah, and that makes sense. That makes a lot more sense for what happened the other day as well. But the other cat was just out there like, "What are you looking at? What are you looking at?" and so yes, Sherman was definitely still protecting us, but he was protecting his property essentially. Get off my land. But
get these ruffians away from my front door. See, I'd like to think that most indoor cats are probably very like entitled about being inside. You know what I mean? Like, come on. There's so many memes out there that make fun of the fact that like we just clean up their shit. We deal with whatever they do to us. They wake us up. My cat woke me up at 4:00 in the morning, just hairball, right? Like, and that's just reality. She's also getting older too.
Yeah.
But you had shared something recently where they were the fluffy
TikTok
gray
video.
cat. Yeah, the TikTok video. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so dead on. I've actually shared a bunch of stuff like that about my cat because I realize I'm so whipped. That's why I'm going to get a dog next. I want a dog. I want a buddy who can go with me places. We could just, it was just easier to pick up poop with a little bag and just take care of it than litter boxes.
And Maine seems like the perfect place for a dog. I mean, even in winter, that would be much better to have than, but I mean, if the cat's indoors, that's fine, I guess. I mean, there is heating after all, Tim.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm mostly still going to be working from home is kind of the little plan foreseeably anyway. So it doesn't really matter that, it's me and the cat, but I do want a dog eventually. I think that would be better. Like, even if I be my buddy, like dog-friendly offices are the best. I think they're great. I'd love to work for one again. But yeah, I'm cool with this being my last cat.
What a way to go. But the weather lately, too, has been a little weird, wasn't it? It was like the last week we had, like, hail, like little, like, pallet-sized hail out of nowhere.
Yeah, which is weak sauce as shit. Like, I come from places where they were, like, oh, my God, am I going to say that word? No, I need to do this. Don't do it for me. Golf ball-sized hail.
Yay.
Oh, my God, one strong step for man. Anyway,
Texas
that
education
size
system
hail.
at its best.
The golf ball. I can't talk good. My God. Just know I'm only making fun of me and nobody else, guys. Anyway, golf ball sized hail was like normal in Texas. And then in Arizona was where, and I thought that I told that story on here, but maybe I was just talking about it recently because it started hailing on me. Mm-hmm. But we had gotten at one point a hailstorm that rolled through, and it was literally softball size. Like, it was no joke, just the size of a softball. And I was like, oh my God, I've never seen one that size. Like, softball, not baseball. I am using the right term, the big softball. And yeah, that was the only one that we found in our work lot that came down like that. So it was just kind of, there was some bigger size too, and they were more of that golf ball sized.
It's like a meteor shower at that point.
I did not expect that in Arizona. Like, coming from hail and sleet country, I really didn't expect it. But yeah, like, it's just been nuts here. We were out on a walk because we were kind of close enough to, like, really anywhere in Portland is probably close enough to any number of walking trails and parks.
Right.
So, that's how we've kind of gotten through this pandemic is, as it's gotten spring, some people meeting up, and we met up to go walk, and just out of nowhere, I was like, oh my God, it's cold. Oh my God, it's raining. Oh my God, is that hail? And that was pretty much the order of me putting together what was going on. And then it happened again the next day, out on another walk with a different friend. So I was like, all right, universe, I'll stay inside, I guess.
Well, I noticed here too that when the hail hit, it was like 5 minutes, and then it went back to being sunny after that, which was weird. I mean, like yesterday, we had a pretty decent amount of rain, which was nice for a while, but just the weather has been all over the place for May, which is bizarre. But there's no global warming, right?
Nope. There's no erratic weather patterns. What the fuck's that?
I don't know. That's all a socialist lie. But let's move on to entertainment here. We had a big merger that not enough people are talking about, and that is this. AT&T is getting out of the content business. It's getting out of the media business. So what they did is essentially spun off WarnerMedia, and WarnerMedia was essentially sold to Discovery, and they are now one big company, one of the biggest entertainment companies in the world in terms of content, which, in some ways could see, it could definitely lead to some good things here because, the fact that an entertainment company bought Warner Brothers. Now I can't talk.
It's contagious. Oh, shit.
Yeah, we'll just be mumbling and grunting by the end of the show here. But the fact that an entertainment company actually bought Warner Brothers, on the one hand, is good because entertainment companies know how to create entertainment content. They don't think of a movie, a film, a book as somebody would look at like an item you would buy at Best Buy. There are unique properties that need to be shepherded in unique ways, and the AT&T leadership was not doing that. But what we are going to be experiencing is, again, more big company consolidations to the point to where right now we really only have 3 or 4 companies that own everything. And that is not healthy overall in terms of, letting riskier stories develop. The big companies with the big entertainment companies routinely show that they don't want to take risks. And if you spend a lot of money, I get that. But if you spend a lot of money in terms of creating something and you're the only person creating content out there, that's going to stifle a lot of innovation in storytelling and whatnot. It's just there's going to be some good that will come of this, but the more companies that buy each other up, the less chance there will be for competition. Because there's even reports now that NBC, Comcast, Universal wants to buy CBS. And at what point do antitrust regulators in Washington have to step in? A lot of this boils down to the streaming wars too, because everybody wants to have the next Netflix, they want the next Disney Plus, and not everybody's going to do it. So unfortunately, to be able to, a lot of the streaming wars now are just going to be people putting content up and either hoping it gets big or hoping they get bought out by a bigger company, and I just find that sad.
Yeah, to me, I can't think of many times that like a monopoly on something, because calling it what it is, because that's like there's supposed to be these monopoly laws, but the more that happens, it's not typically the best thing. So yeah, it's kind of a bummer to see it happen over and over. But I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll just take a huge entertainment shift and go back to entertainment being more local and just really go into local theater. It's like, hey, you know what? Because then it's a great way to blow off steam, right? Like I always found acting to be a great way. So maybe more people will act locally, and then we'll have entertainment that way. No, I don't think it's a great thing, but I guess we won't really know until we see it play out. But I wouldn't vote for it if I had a call in it. It's nothing I can control. It's just
Yeah, I mean, these companies are going to do what they want. Ideally, what could potentially happen is that the government will say you can merge, but you got to sell X amount of assets. Because with WarnerMedia, WarnerMedia isn't necessarily one company. It's Warner Brothers and then all the other companies that they bought. So stuff like DC Comics, for instance, the federal regulators could say you could have everything, but you must sell your comic book division. So and this is just speculation, that could be up for sale. The video game companies like Traveler's Tales, the company that makes the Lego games, they're owned by Warner Brothers. AT&T apparently is going to keep some of the video game operations. So if the Traveler's Tales is no longer owned by WarnerMedia, for instance, do they continue to have the rights to like the Lego Batman games? And do they keep the same people? It's just so much is in flux right now. I just needed to bring it up because, again, just the more these multinational corporations gobble each other up and become fewer and fewer, that's less people with more power and more money in their hands than they deserve, and stuff like that needs to be broken up and it needs to be called attention to. And people shouldn't be, because I think back to like the Disney and the Fox merger, and how there were elements to be excited about as a Disney fan with that, and in terms of, like, example, the Marvel getting access to the X-Men characters, that was a benefit that came out of it. But again, we lost 20th Century Fox. That entire history. I mean, the films are still there, but that studio is no more, and that's history. And companies come and go, and that's to be expected, I guess. But when you have so few companies controlling so much, nothing good will come of that.
Yeah, I think there's, again, I really do love the show Adam Ruins Everything, and this just goes to show that the second time I'm bringing them up. He had a really great way of kind of covering what some of these cable monopolies have kind of done and how it looks. Mm-hmm. I think it was in Adam Ruins the Internet.
Yes.
Pretty sure. Yeah. So... Yep. If you find the episode Adam Ruins the Internet, maybe I can find a clip of that too. But I that's just one of those that stuck with me. That I'm like, yes, see, somebody explained it. I mean, granted, like, maybe don't show your kids unless you're prepared to watch a bunch of grown men act like they're making out with each other.
Wow,
that's what always gets me about some of those episodes. Is every now and then you hit one like, don't play that one for kids. But like a bunch of the other ones are really good.
Or get the podcast version of the episode. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. But just be prepared for that visual.
Well, speaking of stuff like interviews, you have some Hero Circle interviews that you want to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go really too far into them other than they're happening because, again, I don't want the focus of the show to necessarily be on my efforts there. But it's been really cool, just kind of in the background of stuff. I've done a couple of interviews on a few podcasts, and recently I got interviewed with a journalist for the Daily Counter News. They will be putting up an article, I believe, this weekend, so I will probably share that one with the nerddom. Nice. I'll read it over and see if it's anything that I feel the group would be into. Otherwise, it'll just be something I share in my other activist
I did
groups.
a thing. I did
stuff. Like, yeah, because that's just like, I know I've had some interviews like over the last few episodes we've done, and it's like, it'd be nice to catch up every now and then. I know I mentioned that I was doing this thing. I should be like, yeah, I'm still doing it in the background of moving. But yeah, it's been really kind of exciting and getting connected with more people on that. So that's been pretty neat.
Nice. And it sounds like you are having an opportunity to continue your casting director duties, albeit remotely.
Yeah, I met with the fellas that own the haunt, and we discussed it, and as long as it's within a certain budget, I might get to still come do the casting direction. See, I can't talk today. I don't know. Maybe this dandelion drink isn't good, guys. Like,
you're gonna have a stroke on the show, on a very special Friends Talking Nerdy.
The Reverend Tracy becomes the Spirit Tracy. Too dark. Too dark.
No, it'd be like those cartoons at the end of Roger Rabbit who laughed so hard that they died, and then their ghosts come out of their bodies and start laughing as well.
Yeah. Well, but so basically, basically, I expressed that I would be willing to do some stuff remotely. We talked about how that might be a possibility and stuff. So it's still kind of being, I guess, negotiated technically. But I also reminded them, like, there's people here that I like, that I would like to come visit. So it would really give me an opportunity to stay connected to some people here too. Like, it wasn't like a, pay for my plane tickets. Like, it wasn't that. They're really sweet guys, and they don't want to ask me to do that. And what I'm trying to tell them is I would like to do it anyway. So if I'm going to, let's pretend that I'm going to plan to be in Oregon every October. Can I do things remotely and then plan to be on foot for actual production? And that's where it kind of like went, oh, you know what? Yeah. So I was like, Tim, I might come couch surf, and maybe we can do a month of episodes where I'm live, in the same studio. But I've actually had a few friends that said they would be fine if I crashed. And I was like, okay, because I'll probably be gone and busy, so I don't think it would clash with that being intrusive or annoying. But so good news. I might still be back in the area. Sometimes we're going to see how that works out. But I'm excited because I think it'll be totally possible. And I don't really want to work for another haunted house. I kind of fell in love with Fearlandia.
Yeah, and I imagine it would have to be some logistics that would have to be figured out, because a director of any sort of staged outfit is doing a million things at once, and I would imagine that there are some things that you would just not be able to do remotely. So being here in October, but in terms of the other stuff logistically, like, are they talking about like a audition process that they would do via Zoom?
Why not? Because we've been doing that with so many other things lately. It seems like it's a possibility. And then something that even I've said to people before, the way that we did it, because I've always had a counterpart. So, my teammate would, do interviews with me, and there really wasn't a lot of it where it was like, show up in makeup and show up in da-da-da. And even then, that's Zoom. They can take photos and share, like, SFX stuff. And a lot of it is really just down-to-earth interview questions. It's like, can you handle this? It is dark. You might take an elbow to the face. It'll probably be by accident. Like, there's some real conversations. And that's not to say that it's dangerous. There's some articles out there where people have expressed, like, working for a haunted house isn't all that it's cracked up to be. But A, it matters which haunt you're working for, just like with any other job.
Right.
And B, it's your personal interest in it. If you're a haunted house nut and you love doing this, you're going to love working in a haunted house. Like, if you're the type of person that's like, oh my God, this pays, you're going to love working in a haunted house. If you're the type of person that's, oh my God, what is this going to pay? You might not love working in a haunted house. I personally think it's a job of passion. And that's the kind of family we try to build in the background, because you're really close knit for an entire month. Like, you're seeing each other a lot for a month. Like, it's really kind of cool to watch those friendships, like, come and kind of go, and sometimes they develop and stay. It's cool.
Well, like any creative endeavor like that, I mean, it's like, it's possible that you guys could become so famous that, like, you become huge on a state or nation or even worldwide level, in terms of making, like, millions of dollars or anything like that. But, more than likely, the level of fame the group will have is what they have now. And yeah, you're doing it for the passion. If you're doing anything artistic, honestly, just for the money, why are you doing it?
Yeah, like, I don't know if I could make a living technically being a creative. Like, I think I would still want to do something else, just because, like, I feel that kind of makes it more comfortable to live, like people who do both things, right? Kind of have your day job, but still have the sanity, because you get to invest that cool emotional energy in something creative. And I think that's what I've really loved about being able to do that. So fingers, toes, everything's crossed that, they'll try to accept that, like, I might be trying to come for October anyway, and let me do that, because it's a world that I love being a part of. I don't want to say goodbye to that.
Well, one person that may be looking for work here come October time is going to be one Paul Hogan, the former Crocodile Dundee. Apparently, he claims he did not, even though there is photographic proof that he did, outside of his home, write a sign to the homeless people that lived in the area stating, "This is my house, not yours." And that kind of, for me, kind of opened the door in terms of what we ultimately wanted to talk about this week, and that was homelessness. Because on the one hand, you want to look at things from someone in his point of view, I guess, but homeless people are not look at the economy the way it is today. I mean, like July 1st, the national moratorium on evictions is coming due, and it mentioned it in one of the articles that you're going to bring up here. And our homeless situation, as terrible as it is now, could be a whole lot worse. But I know you've been reading a lot into homelessness as well, so let the folks in on what you've been reading.
Well, some of it kind of started because the Mr. Reverend and I were piqued by a series that's being done by Coin called Is Portland Over? And they're driving through Portland. They're talking about, the homeless camps and the trash everywhere and how that's creating a lot of complication. Particularly one thing that I didn't think about, just as a weird little side note, like in a one way that this is very much like something that we should care about helping fix in a good, sustainable way, is one gentleman that's like his job to get major sporting events to come to Portland. Mm-hmm. Well, right now, especially with everything like the graffiti and the trash and the tents being up, his job is to kind of pitch Portland, like as a city, to host something like this. And he said that it's gotten so bad that when he picks people up from the airport, and he cannot take the most direct way, usually to where he needs to take them. And even not taking them the most direct way, it's better, but not best. Like, there's still signs of the tents. There's still some of the, we've got beautiful murals in downtown, but there's like a lot of graffiti that's kind of there now that's not like the artistic beauty that Portland is normally known for. Like, right. I've seen some beautiful stuff done on these overpasses and stuff in the past. And usually it's like somebody got their little permit or whatever to do a thing, and they commissioned an art piece. That's not what's there now. And I've driven through some of it recently, like not in downtown, but we went to the other side because for Stepmother's Day we went to the Vista House. So you kind of hit some of the areas they're talking about. Yeah, but so we're going through it, and you can kind of see that. And then there's been like a lot of stories recently kind of hitting the news and hitting my awareness. I guess recently Portland's mayor has asked the downtown law firms for help with a plan to relocate people sleeping in front of their offices. And then it kind of kills you because the concern, it's like the right thing but the wrong reason type situation here. The right thing is to want homeless people to not have to live on the streets. The right thing is to not want homeless people to have a bunch of trash around them also in that situation, because that impacts like cleanliness, disease, other health complications. Like, there's actually good reasons to not want these things. Mm-hmm. But to me, that should be enough of a reason to not want those things. But I guess what it kind of feels like when you read some of these articles is they're more concerned about lease renewal in downtown. And the major pitch here is, well, if our employees aren't comfortable with coming back to work, well, then we're just not going to renew our leases. So you guys better get this fixed. And I'm like, okay, well, right thing. I can't say that that's the right reason for it. So yeah, I guess they're trying to talk to some of the law firms and figure out like what they can do as far as getting them relocated to certain, I guess, green spaces, et cetera, like that. Like, it is a temporary thing until they can figure out a long-term solution. And then that gets me into tangents of this long-term solution that's been just battled back and forth, but no action on it because dumb things block it. Like they've talked about making those container, how they could take the shipping container and make it into a dwelling.
Yeah.
And it would give them access to a safe place to sleep, running water because they can have like the tents and the shower areas and stuff like that. Great. But then it's like, then homeowners associations get involved because they don't want it built in their neighborhood because it'll reduce property value, So it gets really frustrating to read these stories, knowing that this has been a topic. It's been needing to be worked on. And of course, the pandemic, much like with everything else, it put a big fat magnifying glass over this problem.
Yep.
And and you had mentioned some of these eviction, stays. I thought somebody had shared an article with me, and I'm going to go see if I could find it. I just don't want to get distracted while I'm talking to you right now. But something got extended until 2022 at some point, as far as being able to stay. So I do want to find that. Maybe if you have something you can talk on about for a minute, I can see if I can find that, because I typically trust this person.
Yeah,
but either way, all you're doing is prolonging the issue. Just by the way, because a lot of those weird agreements, we've talked about that before. They want you to pay back like twice your rent, like monthly, until it's paid back. A lot of people struggle to make rent one time over, guys. So I don't see how the long term that this is going to work out. It's
not. I mean, because it's the situation is not going to be this with the moratorium. And as far as the July 1st thing that I'm reading, that was from the Willamette Week article that you sent me. In terms of, I'll read the paragraph here. Hardesty also said that the new threshold for removing camps of 8 or more structures was unreasonably low, and that we would strongly urge this threshold be reconsidered, especially in anticipation of the eviction moratorium expiring July 1st.
Yeah, so they're basically saying they know that it's about to get worse.
Much worse. Because with the eviction process, it's not going to be a situation of starting July 1st that landlords will then have the ability to start evicting people. The court process has essentially already gone through on a lot of this stuff. What's going to happen July 1st is that the landlords will now have the legal ability to be able to start kicking people out. People that have been out of work or severely affected due to lack of work for well over a year now. Mm-hmm. And with things already as bad as they are, with the police being as bad as they are in this town, and I already know of the police causing more problems with the homeless situation than they solve by the simple fact I brought up before that there have been police in Portland that arrest homeless people for urinating outside, which you would think you shouldn't, but if they have nowhere else to go, have? Yes. I mean,
it's so dehumanizing. Like, okay, because yes, we were both downtown frequenters. By the way, we at least got to enjoy downtown Portland kind of more in its prime. Like, that's kind of something I got to reminisce about, like, before all of this happened. And I even had conversations with homeless people. They're not all scary, but I'll get into that by the end of this episode. Because I did want to try to leave us with, like, some kind of more feel-good thoughts, not necessarily the most feel-good thoughts, but something. But yeah, like, you can't pee anywhere in downtown Portland unless you have a receipt or buy something or can get a code, which usually that's supposed to be you buying something, but they'll give it to you if you look like, that's kind of that weird
clean enough thing. And not dirty,
And that's horrible. Like, that is so dehumanizing. Like, as a person who has regular access to a toilet, I've been in that situation where I knew, hey, my eyeballs were floating. I knew I couldn't make it. I knew for a fact there was a bathroom in that area. And to be told no, and it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, I literally just said, no, really, I will pee myself if I have to walk to the store, because it was like a half a mile up. It wasn't like just next door to anything. And so, yeah, I went ahead, did my thing, because I had no other choice. And that felt really shitty. So, and I didn't even need that moment to happen to me for me to realize that it really is crappy to turn down humans from being able to pee.
Well, imagine what's worse here is that, when the police do catch these people doing it, and again, I'm not talking about people that take out their genitalia in public in view of people and do inappropriate stuff. We're talking people that try to like hide behind a tree to do their business. These cops are arresting them and charging them with like sex crimes, and how does that help them get out of the situation, especially when all they're trying to do is just simple bodily function.
It's a bodily function. It is, you literally have to do it at some point.
It makes as much sense as taxing tampons,
Oh, shut up. Anyway. Actually, I don't use any of those anymore. You brought up the too much information topic. No, just kidding.
Okay. Lucky we're not a video show anymore. Hey.
But yeah, so it gets to be an incredibly frustrating topic, and there's a lot of argument on what to do about it. And what's funny is like some of the things like, oh, well, where do we get the money? Where do we get the money? And then you read stories that came out on May 19th that there was a director of some office community of civic life, like in Portland, right? So this is Portland. So Portland paid their bureau director $178,000 to leave the agency plagued by toxic stuff that she created. And that's not even the full actual dollar value of what this person is getting, by the way. Right? Like, and I hate that these articles came out, because otherwise I don't think they're really related, other than they just happened to be like, oh, I read this article, but where's the money? But with what money would we ever do this with? And then, bam, I'm like, I don't know. How about her severance package? But yeah, like the fact that somebody can get a severance package of that amount, and plus like there's other benefits, like something to do with like health stuff and a certain number of months of payment for something that I didn't want to dig into it because I don't like to get myself mad on purpose. Right. But what it came down to was like complaints and proof that this person was causing a very toxic environment in this office. Something that like people like I haven't had a single job where if I created a toxic work environment that I would be paid a severance package to leave. You would just get terminated.
Unless you're management or unless you work at Apple. That's a different story.
Or a director for Portland.
Or something. And that, speaks to how leadership leads. I mean, Ted Wheeler, in his reelection bid, took $150,000 of his own money, which legally he should not have done, and essentially loaned that or something to his own campaign, breaking campaign finance reform. And then, as the Willamette Week article that you sent me showed, there are concerns about the unreasonably low thresholds that police have to break up these camps.
Yeah.
We shouldn't 100% outright dismiss the concerns of like homeowners in here, just because there is a long history of homeowners making unrealistic demands, to protect their property rights that were racist and all that other stuff. But it's like I don't think that their thoughts should be necessarily dismissed, due to the amount of homeless people that are out there. But the decisions that are being made by the current administration in Portland are clearly made to satisfy the CEOs of the companies that are run here, to continue to get the businesses that are here, and they have no regard for the average citizen whatsoever. None. And just the more you hear about how this town is being run by someone like Ted Wheeler, I can't strongly urge people enough that if you live in Portland, visit totalrecallpdx.com and sign the petition to get Ted Wheeler recalled from office, because this is going to continue to happen with him in office. Now, there are, in my opinion, and I know you did some more research on the homeless stuff, so you can kind of talk about some of how to help the homeless here. In my opinion, I think there are ways that the homeless situation in this town can be addressed while also addressing the concerns of the businesses out there. What are some of the things that you found?
Yeah, I mean, really the next thing that I really just kind of wanted to share is I found this really cool article through nyu.edu where they talked about the 12 biggest myths about homelessness in America, because it does kind of cover a little bit of what you hear. One that I'll go into when it comes up, because I'll share it so it's shareable or whatever, people can read it themselves. But I like to dispel the whole thing that it's okay to treat them as if they are varmints. They are not a pestilence. They are human beings. And if there's anything that I can share that can help people view them a little bit better, that's what I wanted to use the last little bit of that for. So if we're ready to go into that, yes, I would be very happy to go into the 12 biggest myths about homelessness in America.
Let's do it.
All right. So, and it's personal to me, by the way, because I don't know if you've known anybody. I have actually had personal friends who struggled with homelessness at some point in their life. And it saddens me what it took for them to get out of that in some situations. And a lot of it is because of stereotypes that we hold. So, and I like it because they made it like short and succinct. It's a numbered list with like a little short thing. So I am just going to read this. So number 1, most are mentally ill, but actually decades of research reveals that 1/3 at most have a serious mental illness. A lot of this comes back to like deinstitutionalization and closure of mental hospitals was some of the initially kind of put out there reasons as the prime cause of homelessness. But this occurred well before that's a sharp increase in the 1980s. So that's not actually true. Number 2, the majority abuse drugs and alcohol. It's really only believed that about 20 to 40% of homeless have a substance abuse issue. Homeless or abuse is rarely the sole cause of homelessness and is actually more often a response because of living on the streets. It puts you more in contact with users and dealers. And I think anybody, if you're hard up enough that you are legitimately living on the streets and somebody is offering you something to make you feel better, that's how some of that hook happens. So
yeah, and also think about it too. If these people are homeless and they don't have a job, they can't necessarily get the money to have a consistent daily drug habit. The problem is that when they do acquire some money, that maybe they get a little too much. Like, let's say they're a heroin addict or something like that, and they save up just enough, and it'd been a couple of weeks. The danger there is if they inject too much, they're gone. It's not like having too much marijuana.
And we will get into that on this list. But yeah, number 3, they're dangerous and violent, being a myth. Homeless people are far more likely to be the victims of violence than the perpetrators of it, is what a lot of numbers show. There are some homeless individuals that may commit acts of violence beyond self-defense, but such acts rarely affect the non-homeless individuals they encounter. Because really, I guess they're saying it's more likely to be a scuff between two fellow homeless people than they are to actually attack you. So when they go through police reports, that's where they would quantify some of this stuff. But to put it in another way, any violence by a homeless person is either self-defense or due to the rare violent perpetrator who preys on other homeless people. Non-homeless people really need to understand this. And that goes back to what I mentioned a little bit ago. Like, I've had conversations like with humans who happen to be homeless. Like, I've never really had it happen where there was many situations that I felt that instinct to avoid them. And
let's think about it too. Let's say you are a homeless person, you find a nice place, like let's say at Waterfront Park, that nobody bothers you. How are you going to be able to keep that nice place if you're always fighting the people around you?
Exactly.
You wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to keep on moving around. So.
Yep. But number 4, that they are criminals. Homeless people are more likely to have criminal justice intervention. That's something that we were talking about leading up to this, especially look at the situation now where officers are being asked to get these camps off of sidewalks. But this is primarily because many of their daily survival activities are criminalized, meaning they might be given a summons or arrest for minor offenses such as trespassing, littering, or loitering. So that's really more of what they find are like the criminal like anything dealing with criminal justice, that's what they're finding. It's not that they're randomly hurting people or doing anything like that or stealing even. I mean, granted, that might even be a given, right? Like if you need to eat food, that's almost where, the beginning of Aladdin starts off with stealing an apple for a hungry child. That is technically, that is a criminal offense. Like, so, but they're even saying like even most of it is these minor things where it's like they almost, police kind of have permission to pick on them is how I kind of feel. Now, granted, that is totally me sharing an opinion, but that's what I feel like some of those, crimes are actually about, is more of an ability to pick on people and then stack things. Because, I mean, we talked about stacking offenses with our friend Ray.
Exactly, yeah, I was going to bring that up. Just, that's the danger there with, the 3 strikes laws, with mandatory minimums being what they are. You have a cop, just tossing out this and that, and a prosecutor wanting to bump up their prosecution numbers because it's election time, and you got a poor person that doesn't have the money to fight this, they're screwed.
Right. Like, and oh my God, triple screwed, because it goes back to speaking of like the whole ban the box situation. There's also a whole ordeal with you kind of need an address to apply for a job. And if you don't have one, well, then you're probably not going to have your resume or anything looked at or the rest of the application. And there are sometimes, like, they can Google an address. And if it's for a homeless shelter, that also is a point that there's no way of kind of proving whether or not that's why somebody didn't choose to hire you. But that's things that can happen. They're just not supposed to do it. So, number 5, and this is probably one that personally really upsets me the most when I hear it, and I'll end with why it upsets me. But basically, myth number 5 is that bad choices led to their homelessness. This puts it really well. So I'm going to verbatim this one. Everyone makes mistakes, but the descent into homelessness is not necessarily the direct result of choices. Far more often, a sudden illness or an accident, losing one's job, or falling into debt leads to eviction. Doubling up with family or friends becomes untenable. And not everybody has access to that too. But the reason that this right here bothers me so much is this is essentially victim blaming. Like the whole bad choices led to it. It's like, first of all, you are making a huge assumption here on this person's life that you've maybe seen with your eyeballs for like 5 seconds.
Right.
So to me, it's a pet peeve. It's one I try not to react to because I don't like, getting mad and yelling at somebody is not normally the best response to them voicing an opinion. Just throwing it out there, even if you really think it's bad. But it is definitely one that I've had to breathe through a few times in my life that I've heard that does seem to be kind of a normal thought of most people that really bums me out.
Okay. What's number 6?
Number six is they prefer the freedom of life on the street, which this one kind of makes me laugh just because, not that I think that is funny at all to be homeless, but just that is the most ridiculous thing I think I've heard. There is no evidence to support this notion that homeless people are service resistant, which they put in quotes in here, which I think is funny. Since housing first began in New York City in 1992, which Housing First is actually the name of a nonprofit, sorry. At the nonprofit Pathway to Housing, Inc., it became clear that the offer of immediate access to independent housing with support services is welcomed and accepted by most homeless people. People on the street often reject the option of crowded, unsafe shelters, but not housing in general. So, yeah, I don't see the freedom of the street argument. That just always felt really weird when people said that.
I mean, do they suspect that people are want to be like the next Jack Kerouac or something like that? I mean, like live the life of a hobo, really?
Right. Like,
I mean, that just makes no sense.
I mean, I'm sure I won't speak in the whole absolute of none, but it really does not seem to apply to the majority.
No, and the people that do voluntarily do it out of some idea of romanticism, this is an assumption, but you have to assume that they have some form of support, and this is just something that they enjoy. They want to do it, and that has nothing to do with, like the homeless population that's by the highway exit by my apartment, or all the other camps that are around town here. Man.
Oh, there's, like I said, there are so many now.
Yeah.
So number 7, that they spend all their money on drugs and alcohol. Interviews with homeless people show that most of their money goes to buying food and amenities such as like socks, hygiene products, and bottled water. And, sometimes like in Portland where it's rainier, even things like mats and stuff, I'm sure. Although some do spend money on alcohol or drugs, the same can be said of anyone. And going into kind of a cool little research study that I found that they did in Canada, researchers gave thousands of dollars to homeless people, and the results defied stereotypes. So I will totally share this, but they basically gave 50 recently homeless people a lump sum. And they followed the cash receipts and like what they did for 12 to 18 months and compared their outcome to that of a control group who didn't receive that payment, which I kind of question like the morals of this. But essentially they were trying to prove they didn't know that giving money was going to be helpful. So I guess that's where it kind of evens out, right? Because if the stereotype is true that they buy it on drugs and alcohol, then the people who were given money would be using it for those things, right? But that turned out to be wrong. By comparison, those who didn't receive cash, it took them a whole year in securing permanent housing. Like a whole year longer. So it does look like that when given like resources, and I'm not saying like necessarily like the $5 and $10 that you might give somebody. I've definitely done that a little bit more recently. I refuse to feel shamed about it because when I give somebody something, it is theirs at that point. And I know that there's kind of a problem going on. So I'm just kind of putting my bet out there that that person probably doesn't abuse alcohol while they're standing there with their kids on the street corner, like trying their best to get through this pandemic. So yeah, that all being said, no, they don't. Now, does that mean necessarily go out and start shelling out cash? Like that's not necessarily like the best choice either. But it goes back to, wow, we just gave away like almost $200,000. Like maybe you could have split that out some and worked on something, getting some people into housing. Number 8, they just need to get a job.
But again, no address, no phone. I mean, they may have the ability. Like there are some government ways to be able to get yourself a cell phone to where you wouldn't have to pay for that. But again, that's if you're able to get that. And if you don't have that phone, or let's say you do have a phone but don't have a consistent way to charge it up, it's going to make you unreliable, and the few people that do call you for an interview, if they're not getting an immediate response back, they're not going to consider you. Yeah, because if you're wanting to work, like it's more complicated than just walking in. If you have no address, no clean clothes, no place to shower, and that's not even touching the stigma of being homeless, or if you've got a criminal record now, possibly from trying to live life as being homeless. But another interesting fact is I guess they found a significant portion of homeless people do have jobs. They just can't afford to pay rent. And then some receive disability income due to physical or mental problems, but still can't afford rent, which is another really shitty problem, is that if you do have a disability or some kind of illness that prevents you from working, like that you can't have enough to have a home, a house. Medicare and Medicaid is just, it does a lot of good, but it also doesn't help either, because people that do receive those at like a younger age, because they were declared disabled or something like that, they can't ever get to a point to where they can earn more, more money, because there is a cutoff. If you earn more than X amount of dollars, you lose your Medicare and Medicaid, and if you are disabled and going to the doctor on a regular basis, it almost impels people to not get like a part-time job for something on the side just because they're bored. It unfortunately keeps people at home. But then again, you have a town like Portland where rent goes up and up, and those Medicare and Medicaid benefits, thanks to even in a state like Oregon, thanks to Republicans being in office for far too long, they have not always risen to the point to where you get like a livable something to live on if you're disabled, and it's scary for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm kind of more of the mentality like that most people kind of don't need to be homeless. Like, I think we could be doing more, but that would take a lot of conversation and a lot of maturity that seems to be lacking in the red team, blue team kind of thing we have going on now, where it's like you've got kind of those hard stances, and really in some ways like both sides are wrong on this topic. But that would be great if we could come together and actually just make real solutions. Like, obviously there are studies out there showing like what can work, what does work. Like, why are we not creating some kind of process to help people get into a home? If that's really the hardest thing, why are we not working but anyway, that's a whole other, I don't want to get into the politics end of it because that'll just get me mad again. Number 9. Another thing. Number 9, the homeless are not part of our community. Surveys actually show that 70 to 80% of homeless people are from the local area or lived there for a year or longer before becoming unhoused. So it's kind of that idea that they're actually just transient somehow and moving from place to place. And yeah, I know. It's not hopping the rail line with your little like sack drawn over your stick over your shoulder.
It's not the Grapes of Wrath.
Yeah, and now that being said, I do remember having a conversation with a lady once at the waterfront where she tried to explain that sometimes, some cities will send you from place to place. Like they'll bus ticket you to another city, and that's how she kind of went around, like in a sense, and was able to stay in like it's weird. So I don't know too much about the practice. So I am totally admitting this is something that a homeless lady I was speaking to told me about. I've got no reason to think she's lying.
She's not, but my understanding of programs like that are, let's say, you're from Texas. Basically, it would be if you became homeless in Portland with the right program, if you had family in Texas that would be able to take care of you, a homeless shelter would be able to essentially get you a bus ticket to get you to Texas. But it's not going to necessarily, I could see that working to where maybe she knew somebody in Portland that would take care of her. But if she's homeless again in Portland, then, whatever happened, I guess. But, you don't want to assume what happened. But they do have those services, but they do it for people that I guess can prove that they have resources at the other town.
Yeah, maybe I should side nerd out about that one, because that's just, to me it was just an interesting conversation I had with somebody. But to me it just kind of almost made sense where if that was a program that the city could use to play a weird shuffle game, that I could see that. Because again, it goes back to where a lot of these conversations where they talk about doing something, they're talking about these humans as if it's like a rat problem. Yeah. And that's where I could see that happening. So maybe I will try to look into that and see if there is some sort of city program that's the equivalent of what some of these homeless shelters are trying to do, that because that sounds very helpful. Like, for example, if I wound up homeless here in Oregon, well, yeah, I've got a brother in Texas. He would probably let me live with him for a bit and help me get on my feet. Yeah. So if there's a program to take me there, I would use it. But who knows if that's not somehow easy to, abuse out of people, like just trying to get from place to place that's comfortable. So I don't know. But I think I'm going to pin that one and put a note to myself to look into that.
Yeah, I mean, what I wouldn't want to see would be essentially shipping homeless population A to location B just to get the people out of there. If it was a completely voluntary service, basically telling people, yeah, if you do have resources in another city, we can help you get there. That's fine with me if that is completely voluntarily. But if we are talking just rounding people up from point A to move them to point B just for the appearance sake, that's a big problem.
Yeah. Well, we just got 3 more, and then we'll be done with this cool list. I do respect a .edu list. What can I say? I'm a sucker for them. But number
University
10,
of Phoenix, right? No, I'm kidding.
Oh God. Well, actually, they're not all. Never mind. Number 10. I'm not gonna be like led to put my foot in my mouth. So number 10, they live in unsanitary conditions because they don't care. Living outdoors means having no regular place for bodily functions. We kind of talked about that, with how frustrating it could be just as any average working person that's not homeless to use the bathroom in downtown. They don't really have places to dispose of trash or store food or, I don't know, bathe. Things that you would kind of assume are issues with being homeless. A homeless person who, quote, cares, end quote, has few alternatives. The research that they did showed that lacking access to a shower is one of the more humiliating aspects of being homeless. So, because again, they surveyed people, they kind of reached out for quantifiable stuff because this is a college, university. So yeah, like I would imagine smelling bad, like, I don't know, I've caught my armpit on a day that I totally missed a morning of putting on deodorant. That feels pretty embarrassing. So I am not going to even come close to saying that is damn near the same thing. But if we can find any point of relatability here, like nobody likes to smell bad. So
yeah,
and even then, in our little not homeless world, when somebody's not showering by choice, that's like a very known sign of depression or something very bad going on. So
it reminds me of the Richard Pryor bit of when he was in Africa and he talked about being in a taxi and like not liking the smell of the taxi driver and having to roll it down because they didn't use deodorant. It's like, oh, the motherfucker smells. But then he saw that the driver was essentially doing the same thing to him because of like the odorant and the cologne he was wearing. He has perfume on. Oh my God, he smells.
Yeah, right. Because there's also a lot of some of that that's cultural, and that's led to even some of the bigotry type feelings with people is, oh, well, they smell weird, right? Like, yeah. But, so let's get that out of our heads that anybody thinks it's okay to smell bad. Like most people don't want to smell bad, and if your friend was not showering, you would be wondering about their mental health. Well,
or
these people actually struggle with both sometimes because like being real, I'm sure being homeless for an amount of time might cause depression. So even if there is any element of it, well, they have access but aren't doing it. Like I would still be more of that being if you don't care about your hygiene, that's normally a sign that, mentally something is up. Like depression, anxiety, things like that. Number 11, and this one's an interesting one that I feel like has a caveat to it, but it says the legal right to shelter is the best way to end homelessness. So they're saying this is a myth. So this is the right to shelter stuff, some of the stuff we're talking about. Austin recently got rid of their camping stuff, apparently, like down in Texas. So there's this is happening in some places where they're shaking up the homeless community because of the pandemic.
Right.
But so what this says is currently shelter construction and maintenance absorb the vast majority of the $3 billion spent yearly by the city of New York to address homelessness. Meanwhile, building affordable housing, the purview of state and local authorities that is left up to private developers, has not kept pace. Thus, the right to shelter can, in practice, displace the right to housing. So I guess, like, in my head, the right to shelter, like, in an essence, could still stand to be protected because they're a human being, but that's not actually going to solve the homelessness problem. So I think it kind of like goes back to, I know in that coin series that I'm totally going to share, there was a little bit of shade thrown by one of the commissioners or something in like San Diego or places that are kind of dealing with their homelessness problem more successfully than we are in Portland. That, it can't end at just giving them the right to shelter places or like camping rights or things like that. Like there needs to be other stuff to help get them into housing. And that even goes back to that Canadian research that I talked about, where even helping people who are new to homeless, like if you can catch them just at the moment of homelessness, especially it seems, because again, their study was newly homeless. It seems like with a little bit of help, they're happy to get back into a house and they're successful again. And then you've got that other nonprofit that article mentions that talks about like, yeah, like even people who have been homeless, when you help get them into homes, it helps, and the recidivism apparently isn't very high. It's not like they get into an apartment for the first time in 5 years and go, you know what, living indoors, this isn't for me. Like, it turns out that is a total myth. Like, that's not what happens. They tend to stay because, again, that gets them where they can have a job. They can take a shower for the interview to get the job and have a place that they can continue to shower so they don't get weird complaints about body odor while they're trying to work.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a lot behind like that there's more to be done. Like, don't take away the right of a human being to exist like in places. Like, they need a place to sleep, but maybe instead of it being something that's punished, it's something that could get them led to help, which I guess that even goes back to, again, when some of our conversation with Ray is that there's better ways to deal with some of these things than just making them punishable offenses. And then the last thing, and this is really more of very much because this is like New York, right? New York University, right? So that's why like a lot of it's New York, and plus New York's another place that's kind of known for a homelessness problem. But number 12, in coastal cities with low rental housing vacancy rates, it is impossible to find enough housing for homeless individuals and families. And this has some stats from New York City, but they had a vacancy rate of 3.6% of an estimated 2.2 million rental units in the city. That means like almost 80,000 are vacant. This number is greater than the approximately 61,000 persons labeled as homeless in that city. So it means that the argument that we simply do not have enough existing housing should be examined more closely. And that even ties into other points made by the research done in Canada of, I know she's up here. My cat just decided to join us. I know we took away video recently, so there's no more entertaining reasons for why we randomly giggle. But yes, my ESA is in the room, and she wanted to make sure we knew it. She's like, yeah, homeless people, like, we should put them in houses. Duh. Like, this is beans. She speaks common sense. But yeah, so basically that argument doesn't seem to pan out, at least in New York City. And then considering how many humans live there, that's where they're basing that, you know, we need to look into this more. Like, what is the vacancy rate in Portland? So would it make more sense to invest in programs to help people get into a home? Like, and that could also be supplemented with the possibility of some of these shelter, you know, solutions. We kind of brushed over the container units and how that can give access. Like, if you are in that situation, you have a place to sleep safely and remain showered and clean and hygienic, because again, that's also a public health issue. So it seems to be that there's a lot of ways that we could tackle this, and a lot of these stereotype reasons given just don't seem to pan out, even in a place as big as New York City.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of like going back to the conversation with Ray. It just, again, blaming the homeless people for their situation, even if they were 100% directly responsible for their actions. Them being homeless had nothing to do with the pandemic. It had nothing to do with medical or losing a job or anything like that. They just became homeless. They still, you know, deserve to be treated with respect because they're human, and they also do deserve to have a roof over their head and just some access to, you know, basic necessities, so they have a chance to do something. You know, this is, and I don't get why people don't see the long-term effects of doing stuff like this. It goes back to the criminal thing. It's like the homeless thing as well. If we are not investing in these long-term solutions, the problem is still going to be there, you know?
Right. And it's like, something that always makes me like confused puppy style turn my head is anytime I see a movie that's like that underdog story, right? And they kind of get a little formulated, because it's either that they're homeless because they create that there was a crime, or they're homeless because some other thing happened, or on the streets for whatever reason. And then, you know, like this kind of listicle pointed out, that they can get charged for stuff, so then they end up in situations like, but come on, how many movies have the premise of somebody hitting that level and fighting their hardest and getting past every obstacle, and now they're a CEO or some shit. And it's like, well, you know what? That heart actually exists in a lot of people, but they just didn't. They couldn't make it because it is that hard to break through. So why is it that we recognize that these stories are out there and we're like, oh man, that homeless person was always such a good dude, but we don't want to apply that to like the fact that most people aren't garbage humans. Most people aren't awful human beings that are evil or whatever. Most people aren't. Yeah. But we don't want to apply that to this demographic, it seems, as a culture. And it's something that just, it breaks my heart as equally as it does infuriate me sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it says a lot about a society on how they treat their lowest people. And if you have the lowest people, the weakest people getting abused consistently and over again, I mean, we're not going to solve homelessness with this particular episode here, but we do need to think about, supporting long-term solutions here, listening to both sides, but also when it comes to stuff like, the availability of homes, for instance, we really do need to talk about the people that buy these homes that rent them out or whatever. We needed to, because speaking of Adam Ruins Everything again, I think he was the one who mentioned the abuse of Airbnbs. You have basically apartment buildings now that are all essentially Airbnbs because the landlord kicked everybody out and is using that to make their money.
It's more. Oh my gosh, it's so much more to rent an Airbnb than monthly rent. And if you can keep that going, I can totally understand the temptation there. I can understand it. It does not mean I agree with it.
Yeah, there's that. There's the lack of rent control. And honestly, too, I think when it comes to having an individual buy a house that they are going to use for a rental home or something like that, in my opinion, there should be standards in place to where that landlord has to have X amount of money saved up so that they're not, consistently, so they have enough protection on their end in case one of the renters does they kind of default and they have to go the eviction route, because a lot of these landlords are just buying properties left and right. And then, if one person has like a bad month or something like that, then everything's bad for them. But then there's a lot that needs to be done. We just need to be mindful. And more than anything, we need to respect our fellow man.
Oh, exactly. And that's what honestly kills me, because a little bit of, that I don't like all Republicans or all Democrats or things like that. I do try to sway from that. However, a large part of the Republican demographic are Christian. Okay.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
A little bit of something to think about if you're one of them folks. Is, there's like kind of a lot of famous sayings like in this book called the Bible, somewhere around in Matthew, where Jesus is being quoted an awful lot talking about taking care of the least of these.
That's socialist propaganda. American Jesus wouldn't say that.
America Jesus wouldn't say that. But yeah, but it's like that is something I have totally said when I've just been tired because, I came from Bible country. Fortunately, a lot of my views and questions on the homeless was something that I even questioned back then, back in Tejas. And even then, I've known a few people every now and then that, like I've said, I've had to kind of breathe and let it go. And some of those people happened to be Christians. And a lot of times where those conversations ended, it was me saying, hey, a quick question for you. What do you think Jesus meant when he said the least of these? And referred to the least of these, because I'm pretty sure he was talking about the hungry, the thirsty, the impoverished, the sick, and possibly even the imprisoned, because there was actually a lot of awareness that people weren't necessarily imprisoned for fair things back in J days too. Yeah. So if you believe in those things and are a Christian, or even for me, I'm an omnist, so I take it a little bit of everywhere, I guess. But if you want to, feel free to bring up that argument. If you feel like you're kind of stuck in that rut with somebody that that's some of their belief, it's like, hey, no offense, but even your dude said we should be taking care of this problem.
Yeah. I mean, because You got to love your fellow man. You got to love your neighbor. And that reminds me, did you see that article I posted up about 143 Day?
No, what's 143 Day?
Yes, it was something that happened in Pennsylvania. It was a local holiday that they want to do nationally. It's in honor of Mr. Rogers. 143 was, for him, it was I love you, because there's one letter in I, love has four letters, you, three.
Oh, yeah.
And he tried, I guess he was able to do it throughout his adult life. He weighed 143 pounds at all times because he wanted to keep that in mind. And the article that I mentioned was an op-ed piece, but it was in Time Magazine, basically stating that we should make 143 Day, which is local in Pennsylvania, but make it a national holiday and make it something that, encourages neighborliness, encourages loving your fellow man in terms of just reaching out, having some empathy. The cynic in me is like, yeah, if we did this, more than likely a majority of people are just going to treat it like any other holiday and ignore it. But when it comes to the subject of Mr. Rogers, to me, this Sunday, the 143rd day of the year, is 143 Day, and I think in honor of that, we should do what we can to help our fellow man out. And I think we've done that talking about this.
Oh, yeah, and that's great. I had no idea that was coming up, but I think that's just going to be a personal holiday that I try to celebrate. Yep. I kind of was like, man, I wish we had the kids this weekend. That would be cool to do. But maybe I'll just do something else instead. So it's the 143rd day of the year.
Yes, and I will send you that link when we wrap up recording. But
sounds good.
But yeah, they wanted to just get some awareness for it, and for all the good that Mr. Rogers did during my lifetime. I want to do what I can to help spread that, because he had a wonderful message. And he was a preacher too. If there's anybody that practiced what they preached, it was him. And but yeah, I figured. We'll end the show this week on the 143 note. So anything else you want to bring up?
Oh, no, I think I talked a lot about things and stuff. And I think I felt like I got to nerd out a little bit more this week than I have in the more recent weeks. So I got impassioned about some things. Hopefully people like that. That's kind of the entertainment I try to bring, is nerding out over dumb trivia usually. But, I like to talk about serious stuff because it goes back into... we try to normalize talking about stuff because it's life. It's all around us, and some of these topics are uncomfortable, and kind of the point to helping them go away would be if we talked about them more, I think.
And so that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, I challenge anybody to talk about this stuff, because I know I've been guilty myself of having opinions on topics like this in the past without necessarily doing an appropriate level of research on my end, or at times, admittedly, having empathy, for other sides in situations like homelessness and whatnot. But it's another week. I think we'll wrap it up here. So
it was a good time.
It definitely was. And I got a bong that is waiting for me.
Nice. I just saw the sun come out, so I actually might go for a walk.
That would be nice.
It's shining. Yeah. It's like, Tracy, if you come out now, we promise we won't hail on you this time. So that would be nice. I should enjoy it.
I am just getting over, because this past Wednesday I had my second dose, getting over some body pains. So,
how did that go for you? Did you do okay?
Yeah, I mean, apart from the body pains, it was not as severe as it was last time. The last time I did have a day to where I felt like a cold coming on, but then the next day I was fine. But now it's just more physical, like touching my arm hurts. So
do those windmills, buddy. That'll really help work that out.
My Pete Townsend impersonation, but I got that in, and definitely excited for that. And I also have a paper I need to finish.
Ooh, well, go finish your paper. I actually, speaking of that interview link, I just got it sent to me, so I think I'm going to look at that and carry on with my day too. So,
all right.
Thanks again for tuning in, everybody.
We will see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.